now we're in chapter 8. The title of this chapter, I'm calling it, Truth Will Be Thrown to the Ground in chapter 8. And we have to get our chronological bearings set. So let's take a look at what we talked about last time. Here's chapter 1, which occurred about in 605 BC. Nebuchadnezzar dreams of the statue in chapter 2 in about 595 BC. And then Daniel interprets the handwriting on the wall in 539. Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den about 537. But now we're backing up. Last week we were in about 553 BC when Daniel sees the vision of the four beasts. That's chapter 7. This chapter, we're right here in about 551 BC. Daniel sees a vision of a ram and a goat. So if you got your Bible here, go to chapter 8 in Daniel. Now this is going to be a little complicated. This is a hard chapter to get through, particularly in the amount of time we have, because there's so much going on and there's so much historical data that you need to know in order to understand what's going on in the chapter. So bear with me. This is going to be a little bit complicated, but we'll do our best. What happens is Daniel has a dream of some kind, and he dreams he's actually in Susa. Here's Susa. This is modern day Iran. He's really in Babylon, but he has a dream that he's in this town called Susa. And here's what happens in verse 3. It says, I looked up, and there before me was a ram with two horns, standing beside the canal there in Susa, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later, which is a reference, as you'll see here in a minute, to the Medo-Persian Empire. I watched the ram as he charged toward the west and the north and the south. No animal could stand against him, and none could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased and became great. This ram here, which had two horns of different sizes. Now, what does this refer to? If you jump ahead in the chapter, it actually tells you who it refers to. This is one of the visions that are actually interpreted for you. So we're going to jump ahead in the chapter and point out that this ram applies to the Medo-Persian Empire from 539 to 332 BC. When Cyrus took over, and it went all the way to when Alexander the Great destroyed or overran this Medo-Persian Empire. You can see this Medo-Persian Empire took up quite a lot of land in those days, quite a lot of land today as well. So that's who this ram is supposed to represent. And we'll get into more detail here in a minute. The dream goes on. As I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came from the west. Oh, by the way, the direction. Remember he said, watch as the ram charged toward the west and to the north and the south. So it came out of Iran. This is called Media, but this is current day Iran. It came toward the west, the north, and the south. All right. Now it says, I was thinking about this. Suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came from the west, toward the east, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. Who is this a reference to, do you think? Yeah, this is a reference to Alexander the Great, who, as we'll see here in a few minutes, was unprecedented in his military exploits. And the amount of time that he had and the land that he covered has never been duplicated. And this guy lived 300 BC. He came toward the two-horned ram I had seen, meaning the Medo-Persian Empire, standing beside the canal, and charged at him in great rage. I saw him attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering his two horns. So shattering the Medo-Persia Empire. And this does refer to Alexander the Great, who lived from 356 BC to 323 BC. He died when he was 32 or 33, depending upon when his birthday was. We're not exactly sure. But this is a mosaic of Alexander the Great, and I'll explain where that came from here in a minute. How extensive was his empire? Even more extensive than the Medo-Persian Empire, and he did all this in about 10 years. As we'll see here in a minute, we're going to look at how he actually did this. All right, back to the text. The ram was so powerless to stand against him. In other words, the Medo-Persian Empire was so powerless to stand against him. The goat knocked him to the ground and trampled on him, and none could rescue the ram from his power. The goat became very great, but at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off, and in its place, 4 prominent horns grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven. Now, who is this referring to now? Does anyone know, historically?